Mr. Michael, Social Studies teacher. Click the link to learn how to use these topic summary videos. The American Revolution was sparked by a series of events and actions taken by the British government and colonial leaders. One of the main issues was taxation. Colonists felt the taxes were unfair and unjust and imposed without their consent because they were not represented in the British Parliament. In the 1700s, the British government began imposing new taxes on the American colonies. The colonists were upset because they had previously been allowed to govern themselves with little interference from Britain. They believed that they should only be taxed by their own colonial governments, not by a distant and unfamiliar government in Britain. The government of Great Britain and most colonial governments had a two-house legislature, with one elected and one unelected house. The colonists objected to being taxed by the British, as they were not allowed to vote or elect representatives to Parliament. However, most people in Britain could not vote but were still charged taxes. The colonists responded to the taxes by writing pamphlets, giving speeches, and resorting to boycotts to avoid paying taxes. The colonists used several methods to protest British taxes. One method was through protests and demonstrations. They would gather in public spaces and voice their opposition to the taxes. Another method was through boycotts. They would refuse to buy British goods as a way to show their displeasure with the taxes. As the situation escalated, some colonists also engaged in acts of civil disobedience and sabotage, such as refusing to pay taxes and smuggling goods to avoid paying taxes. These methods were used by the colonists to express their anger and frustration over the new taxes and their desire for self-rule. Britain passed different acts in the 1700s for a variety of reasons. One of the main reasons was to raise revenue for the British government. Britain had incurred significant debt from wars with France and other countries, and the government needed to find a way to pay off this debt. They believed that taxing the American colonies would be an effective way to generate additional income. The Stamp Act was a tax imposed by the British government in 1765. It required colonists to pay a tax on printed materials such as newspapers, legal documents, and even playing cards. The purpose of the act was to raise revenue for the British government following the 7 Years' War. The Stamp Act was met with strong resistance and played a significant role in escalating tensions between the colonies and Great Britain. Women played a vital role in the resistance against the Stamp Act. By making homespun cloth, they supported the boycott of British goods. It was a way of avoiding taxes on imported goods. It provided a cheaper alternative to taxed goods and was an act of resistance against British control. Women demonstrated their skills in spinning and weaving as a way to actively participate in the revolutionary cause. It was repealed in 1766, but the resentment remained, and it contributed to the growing revolutionary sentiment that led to the American Revolution. In 1767, the British government passed the Townsend Acts. These were a series of laws that aimed to raise revenue after the repeal of the Stamp Act. The acts imposed taxes on various goods such as glass, paint, lead, tea, and paper. The Townsend Acts were met with strong resistance by the colonists. The Boston Tea Party in 1773 was a key event that escalated tensions between the colonists and the British government. The East India Company, which controlled the tea trade, was financially hurt by the boycott, so Parliament allowed them to sell tea directly to the colonists. This made legally sold and taxed British tea less expensive than smuggled tea. The colonists saw this as a trick to charge them taxes and destroyed the tea in protest. In 1774, the First Continental Congress was called in response to the Intolerable Acts. The Intolerable Acts were a series of laws passed by the British government in 1774 in response to the Boston Tea Party. These acts were seen as a way for the British government to assert greater control over the colonies and further limit their rights. This group of delegates from 12 American colonies organized a boycott of British goods with the hope of urging Parliament to repeal the acts. One of the Intolerable Acts was the Quartering Act, which required colonists to provide housing and supplies for British troops. The British justified this as a way to have the colonists foot the bill for their own defense. These actions and events ultimately led to the American Revolution, as the colonists fought for their rights and representation in government. Time to review. Answer the following questions based on the information from this video. What did the government of Great Britain have in common with most colonial governments? What was the main objection the colonists had to British taxation? What unique role did women play in protests against the Stamp Act? Why were the Townsend Acts passed in 1767? Why was the First Continental Congress called? Describe the structure of the British government during the 1700s, and explain how these features were reflected in the colonies. What arguments did the colonists make against taxation, and why did the British Parliament find these arguments difficult to understand? What three tactics did the colonists use to protest British taxes? What events led to the Boston Tea Party? What was the First Continental Congress, and what did it accomplish? What was the justification for the Quartering Act, and how did it relate to other British goals in their policy towards North America? Thanks for watching. Good luck on your assessment.